It's everything that came out in 2022 and things that I saw in 2022. Movies, television, video games, and books, ostensibly, although I rarely read books when they come out, and I did play one or two games, but, small stuff. You're not going to hear me talking about God of War. Continuation of me using YouTube as my personal journal. It wouldn't be a tier list without tears. I don't cry easy, so I've got some chopped onions just off screen. We'll see if we can make that happen. Let's go alphabetically. Theoretical graph here of the x-axis is enjoyment. Pure enjoyment. And then the north to south, the y, if you will, the y-axis will be potpourri. There's just reasons that make it memorable, make you like it more or less outside of pure enjoyment. And that's what I'm going for here. Number 1, Atlanta, Season 3. I started watching this because I liked Community, and Donald Glover was great, and this is a 180 for him. If you haven't seen this show before, it's very dour, very low-key. He plays just a depressed guy all around. But Season 3 was great. It bears some resemblance to another show we'll talk about later, but it all takes place in Europe as part of the tour. It's all just excuses to do weird things and out-of-the-blue things compared to the rest of the show in Atlanta. And it even goes beyond that. There are like anthology episodes, almost like Jordan Peele shorts, except I don't know if you've never seen The Comeback of the Twilight Zone. Far better than Jordan Peele.
If you don't start using your common sense and acting right, these white people, they're going to kill you.
Just read.
Kill you. Now do the worm.
So I really enjoyed this, and it was weird. So I don't even need to move because I'm sitting right about where the two axes meet. I should be, and so it's going up here. Enjoyment, it gets a 7. And I think on the potpourri category, for just like the general weirdness and creativity and doing something out of the blue, it gets an 8. So we're starting off strong. Next up was a movie people online like to talk about. Barbarian. Barbarian was a movie. It's a horror movie, and that's sort of the more spoilery thing that I can't talk about. I don't care enough, and it's not interesting enough to talk about it here. I'm going to have a spoiler section at the end of the video for at least one movie. And the way it's structured and the way it focuses on different areas of the story is very interesting. It starts off with this kind of faux romance story in the beginning, and it reaches out to the redemption of a rapist, maybe. And it goes in weird different directions, and it brings them together, and it takes them apart. And that was the part I found really interesting. I think the core horror element kind of sucks. I don't think there's actually anything too scary in here outside of like 60 seconds towards the end of the first act. But it's interesting how it's told. So I'm giving Barbarian... Ooh, spooky. A 6 on enjoyment. Ooh, 5 for potpourri, because there was nothing particularly interesting or disinteresting that I have to comment on. Next up is the Batman, which I kind of made a small video for on my channel, a joke, which is obviously, it was an obvious joke that other people made, and people who knew how to use video editing and masking made it better, but it made me happy. The Batman... Oh, that's I'm not going to do that again. That's ugly. This is my frog face. The best thing I can say about it is that it was very, very long, and it didn't feel that long. For a movie over 3 hours, it felt fine. But the issues come in that the Batman is essentially a collection of scenes that look cool that don't really go together. It was like the Marvel process is like, okay, we'll have this cool scene and this cool scene, and get someone to write it. And this is how it felt. It was not cohesive. It was very scatterbrained. And some of the logic to sort of bridges from like point A to point B was just nonsense. There is a point with the Spanish language that I swear makes no sense. And I double checked with other people. And that's a shame, because when you have a mystery, more on that later, it needs to make logical sense. Otherwise, it just caves in on itself. And so like the entire detective side of the story fell on its face. But cool visuals, cool trailer scenes, and it's watchable. So I'm putting the Batman at 5 out of 5. It's fine. And I have to stress this, being fine in this instance is actually surprising and an achievement when your movie is that long. Better Call Saul, the final season. The prequel to Breaking Bad, which is one of my favorite shows. Sorry to be that guy. I know that's of course it is. But I wasn't a big fan of Better Call Saul like people were. I liked it well enough. I thought it was a very fun show. I just didn't think it ever came close to the masterpiece that was Breaking Bad. Final season in particular got very pulpy and tonally sort of different than the rest of the show at times. And the main issue I had with the show in the latter half was Lalo, who apparently people like him, but he was, to quote South Park,
"It's him! Oh God, it's him!
Jesus, save us!"
Give it up, Mexican Joker. You don't want to do this.
he was goofy. He wasn't even pulpy. He was like way too successful at everything he did, way too brazen. We left like the real world at this point. We went from pulp to just super villain. I'm going to put it up there with Atlanta. 7 out of 7. Squarely 7 out of 7. So a little below Atlanta. It's a very solid show. It's the definition of good. Oh wow, I'm feeling the tears now. Oh, that stung. It's It's good. It's solid. So, I feel like I need to justify why I watched this next show. I think the opening is both catchy and very energetic, and it looks fun. I saw it and said, yes, I've heard this was crazy. This looks nuts. I'm going to watch this show. The opening is the opposite of what the show is. The opening is crazy and energetic, and it's a ADHD on a crack pipe, and then you get to the show, and it's ADHD on Ambien, which is a shame because I wanted ADHD from the show. The actual presentation feels very sleepy. The pacing is slow, and not only that, but it's the direction. The direction is so weird to the point where there are things that are satire or jokes, I think, but I'm not sure they are because of the way it's directed. Everything is just slow. There's a strange way that this entire show is presented. And let's talk about the timing there, because humor at the end of the day is all about timing. Have direction that's languid when everything stalls. I suddenly don't even know if they're making jokes anymore. I don't even know if there's certain elements that are satire or if it's just played straight, which would be really weird. And so this is something where I could see the original being very clever or being very funny or being very satirical, but it's just, I don't think it translates. I think this show fails mostly on the direction, which is a weird thing to say for an adaptation where literally everything else probably could work in another context if you just had someone a little snappier. It feels like the director got slapped with a big budget project they weren't necessarily into, but then realized, I can do whatever I want. I got a big budget. So they just kind of rotoscoped everything. And I think the only time it worked was perspective villain, main character, Makima, who's like the head of the FBI. She's very, very slow moving. She's very tempered in her responses. And it makes her a very interesting character for the rotoscoping and this sort of slow approach. It worked for her character delivery. It didn't work anywhere else in the show. In fact, it was pretty baffling. And not a spoiler, but on that last character, if you're seeing the show, I'm fairly certain she is what the show calls a devil. Like, it's one of those twists where, like, this show screamed it at you way too loud, where I go, it's clearly what's happening. Would it surprise anyone? I don't know. Maybe it's a presentation issue again. If you're the kind of person who uses the word anime, you're probably going to like it. But if you're not going to like it. But it's not loathsome. Like, this, so many elements here could have gone the other way and just been, like, repulsive. It wasn't. It was fine. 5 out of the enjoyment factor, and 6 for some nice animation and making me engage with the subject matter and, like, confused, believe it or not, in this instance. Next up is one of our only 2 video games. And yeah, don't get excited. When I play video games, I play an indie game on Steam that's normally a roguelike. That's when I play a new game. Cult of the Lamb. I saw this during like the Game Awards or something. I didn't see the Game Awards. I don't care about that. But I just saw it on Steam. Oh, it's on sale. I'm like, oh, that looks really nice. Before we talk about it, here's what you need to know about the ratings on Steam. If you see a game that looks really, really good, because this game has a great art style, if you see it looks really good and it says very positive, that probably means the game's not very good, but it's just really well polished. it's half Animal Crossing, half Binding of Isaac, where after you go through the Binding of Isaac dungeons, you go back to town and you manage your cult and your followers and you build houses and you craft. And it's a weird mishmash. It didn't detract from each other. These two things weren't like the wrong side of the magnets, but they weren't the right side of magnets either. So I'm guessing what I'm saying is I shouldn't be talking about magnets because that doesn't apply here. It's just disparate elements that didn't work together, and I think the game kind of suffered because of that. Like the Binding of Isaac sections are worse than Binding of Isaac. The town sections are worse than Animal Crossing, if that's what we're comparing it to. So, just like a 5 out of 5. I don't know, just completely unengaging. Do not care. I did not get to beat it. I stopped after beating the third boss. I just said, ugh, I need to stop shrugging. Ugh. Next up, more animation. I like animation on principle. Even Japanese animation. I don't like most of it, but I don't hate it on principle, as we will see. Next up is Cuphead, which is not Japanese. The first season was fine. They published the second season, and this is awful. Like, this is actually awful. The first season was a little comatose with like flashes of brilliance, and I guess it did well. This felt like someone who maybe didn't deserve it getting a little too much praise, where it's all bloated, it's all exaggerated. I complained about Chainsaw Man being a little too slowly paced, a little too bloated. Holy crap. Like, there's like 2 episode specials that aren't even long enough for a single episode. It's trying to be the old style Looney Tunes. It's trying to be even like SpongeBob a little bit, and it's just completely failing. Like there is maybe 3 to 4 minutes of content for every 10 minutes that you're getting. It's bad, and it's very much in the wrong direction. I could not finish the season. I mean, I made a good try. It's pretty accessible, pretty easy to get into, but I never played the game either. I like animation. Sucks. I really hated this. Especially because you're coming from the first season and you're seeing whoever's in charge here, the creativity in charge, glomping onto the wrong thing and like pushing up the bad part of the show. Because there was something that worked there. There was something genuinely interesting in the first season, and it's just, oh. So I'm putting Cuphead like 3 out of 3. 3 on the X, 3 on the Y. Now you might be saying to yourself, oh, a lot of tender love and care went in there. Animation, you gotta give it credit for that. I couldn't care about anything. It was a slog through and through. So we got our first overtly negative. Are you ready for more animation? Cyberpunk Edge Runners. This is also something I watched because it was really crazy, because people told me it was really crazy, and it kind of was. This is good. I would recommend it. It's very bloody, very gory, very violent. I mean, it's obviously not for most people. And there's a lot I could break down here. It's 10 episodes long. It's a decent length. And there's just so many things to like pick apart and look at and analyze. But this is not the point of that video, and I really don't feel like doing that. But yeah, if you're just looking at it, great style, a pretty good story. The pacing got weird at the end. Out of all the Netflix shows, normally they're like, oh, you're too long. Why would you give this so many episodes? This is the opposite problem. Netflix seems to always do the opposite of what it needs to be. If it needs to be longer, they make it shorter. If it needs to be shorter, they make it longer. I call it the Netflix contrarian principle. Surprisingly emotional, too. But by the time you get to the end, you feel things. You feel excitement. You feel sadness. And this is another thing where I don't think I responded to this in the same way as other people did. All right, I'll add this to the spoiler section. Why I thought Edge Runners was a happy enough ending. I just thought it was paced weird, and there were some weird atonal things, especially in like the first episode or the second episode. And there's just some weird jank, and it was just compressed enough. It was good. It was good. I'm giving Edge Runners a 6 on enjoyment and a 7 for style and music and pretty much everything else. I really like the show. It's closer to being higher. It's closer to being better on my list than it is worse. Doctor Strange and the Multiverse of Madness. And this one I watched because director Sam Raimi, and let's just put director in quotes, collection of video game cutscenes that have no weight, no meaning, and it's a shame. I like Raimi for the most part. Drag Me to Hell. We'll fight you on that one. We'll see if we can get some tears for this one. Marvel, if you're listening, why do you do this previs thing? Why do you plan out the video game cutscenes ahead of time when they're not even that particularly good? Like, Marvel meets the bare minimum for action and adventure, but they're not, like, great. If you're just going to pull those scenes from an animation perspective, there's no, like, real tension, and there's no gravitas, there's no real presentation flair. It feels like they've built their entire genre on the back of just bland animation. And maybe that's the point. Maybe that's what we both have to learn here, Marvel, is that you can't just make a cool scene and just have it have that emotion and that weight and that core oomph that movies need to have. Maybe that comes from the characters and the story and the stakes, and the action scenes are just sprinkling on top. Maybe no matter how hard you direct or how cool your action scenes are, you're just never going to get there. It's disappointing. It's probably the most interesting movie to talk about this year. Glass Onion. Boy, oh boy, do I have some strong opinions on Glass Onion. And let's just break this down half and half here. Glass Onion, the first half is delightful. When it starts off, there's this energy to it, and there's like this practical shots and interesting filmmaking, and you're like, oh, it feels like I'm watching like a real movie, like not a Marvel movie. And it's great, and there's a fun mystery, and the one asterisk is, this is Rian Johnson, this is the guy who wrote Yo Mama.
I believe he's tooling with you, sir.
About his mother.
And you can tell that it's still him. It's not as grating, it's not as overbearing, but there is always that sort of like internet Redditor humor he has that's grating, and you feel it a little bit. It's broad, I think it appeals generally, but also you feel it in the back of your soul. And then we get to the other half, which is this. It sucks. It's a shame because I really liked going into it. I love murder mysteries. I even liked the first one. I think this movie makes some big old mistakes that I can't talk about. This is the purpose of the spoiler section. If you have seen it or you haven't seen it and you don't care, join me in the spoiler section as I point out some really, really big errors. I don't think this movie makes sense. I think he was so focused on a good twist, he didn't think the complications of that twist. What would that mean in the characters' heads and what they would know and what they would do based on what they know. The last half of this movie, once you find out going on, you go, oh? And then I went, oh. It's nonsense. And if you disagree with me whatsoever, after listening to my spoiler talk, hit me up and tell me what you think I got wrong. Because I feel like I must have missed something because it's, in my mind, it's that nonsensical. People do things just for the plot to happen. They forget what they already know. It's weird, man. I'm giving Glass Onion, it's entertaining enough, I suppose. A 5 for enjoyment, and then like a 3. 5-3. It's enjoyable, but man, is it stupid. Which is a shame. I love tight murder mysteries, and they don't really make them. You don't get good murder mysteries. Oops, I forgot something. Hellraiser 2022. I was pretty excited for this. It looked good, had a decent director attached, and I really liked the first Hellraiser movie. I actually got into the franchise in high school just watching the really crappy ones on the Sci-Fi Channel. I think like Hellraiser 4 or 5, like the really bad ones. Although, if we're being honest, Hellraiser 2 is the worst by... It's one of the worst movies ever made. So in some ways I have some affinity for this property, in other ways I don't. And I didn't like this one. Hellraiser looks really good. There's like an air of gravity to what's going on, but essentially this is just a crappy slasher movie, which if nothing else, the only slasher movies for Hellraiser franchise are the later ones. I mean, the first one's like this weird family drama where the big horror elements are barely there. And the second one is like this weird, perverse, like labyrinth kind of movie, R-rated labyrinth. So if we're considering those the core franchise, like this is weird. There was one time in this movie where the little Hellraisers, Pinhead or one of the Cenobites was just hanging behind the character, following them like a really cheap jump scare. I just was like, that's not a thing Cenobites do. I don't think that's a thing any movie a Cenobite has done. So it was really strange. So you can say like, oh, it's well directed. Oh, there's nice shots. Oh, it's about drug use and it's got weight to it. Do not care. I don't care. It kind of sucked. All the characters were kind of horrible, and the only character I did like died first. So even if you're going to turn Hellraiser into a cheap slasher movie, like at least have characters we like. But there's just nothing here. 4 out of 4. Next up is, I guess it's technically a film, The House on Netflix. It was a collection of short stories, 30 minutes, 30 minutes, 30 minutes, just about all related to home and houses and belonging. And it's a mixed bag. It's 3 different companies, 3 different stories. The first story was about a family that sells their home for infinite wealth and lives in this manor. It's all this cute, like, stop animation. It's all stop animation little rag dolls, and it's like a moderate horror story. It's cute. I really liked it. I was into it. The second story was a little frustrating about this rat who is trying to fix up his home to sell it, but there's pests in the house. Haha, get it. The rat is a pest, but he's trying to get rid of pests. It was frustrating, but it was fine, I guess. I don't know. There was just, at no point are you really ever, like, rooting for him. There's not enough grounding to say, like, oh, he needs this money for XYZ. It's just, he wants money. Isn't it sad he's not getting more money? No. And the final story was weird. Just kind of like hipster, melancholic about this house in the middle of the ocean that's slowly going up. And it's about letting go of your home and moving on. And it was fine. No strong feelings one way or the other. So overall, I'm giving The House a 6 out of 6. Even the ones I wasn't necessarily into, I felt something, or I was looking at something always. It was engaging. It was good. Make more anthologies and short stories. Next up is the 15th season of It's Always Sunny in Philadelphia. Yes, I have seen the other 14, which is a good lead-in because that's kind of the importance of this season is that they filmed the entire thing in Ireland. It all takes place in Ireland. And when you filmed a series for 15 seasons, it gets a little stale. And this show was feeling it. And this was a breath of fresh air. Not a lot, but I enjoyed it. So I'm giving It's Always Sunny, season 15, a 6 out of 6. If you like It's Always Sunny in Philadelphia, you like this. It's an uptrend. I think it's better than what it has been in a couple of seasons, but, breath of fresh air. The Looker. This is like a free demo game on Steam. It's like an hour long, maybe more, but I'm putting it on the list because it's fantastic. It's in the style of The Witness, which was like this very art housey puzzle game that came out many years ago, and I think this might be by the same guy. It's amazing. It does the most you can do with taking a child's crayon menu and turning it into a video game, which is a joke even the game makes. But I'm stealing it because I would have made that joke without you making the joke. It's interesting. It's clever. It's funny. It's free. If you like puzzle games whatsoever and funny and clever things, go play it. I'm giving it an 8 out of 8. Yeah. The Midnight Club. Mike Flanagan every year directs something for Netflix or writes something or he gets it to Netflix as some sort of horror show. And there was 2 that came out this year. There was this one and there was the Del Toro one. And boy, oh boy, I should have watched the Del Toro one. It's on my list. I promise I will. But The Midnight Club is awful. This is hot garbage in a way you haven't seen. And Mike Flanagan shows are really good and surprisingly adult, or his movies. This is like CW. And I know that's a broad thing to say. People say, oh, it's CW all the time. But it means something. CW, we say it's CW for a reason. It's like these really thin characters having really teen dialogue that's no depth and just supposed to be high drama. And I hate all these guys. I hate these characters for the most part. They're bad, and there's like a twist, like, oh, you were supposed to hate them, but actually no, screw it. And It's also a shame because it's in two parts. There's a framing device of these teenagers who have cancer and are going to a hospice to die. Really interesting, possibly spooky. And that's all crappy for the most part. It's really cheap horror. And then they get together at night for the club where they tell each other short stories. Not a single one landed. There were some that were fine. There was one in particular where I said, and then it just didn't, it was like, oh, that's all. And there was one of them, which is legitimately my least favorite short story of all time. I'll post the episode number right here. I mean, this is the point where I said, oh, wow, I think I hate this show. I was going to find clips of episode 5 to show you. I couldn't. OBS was being finicky, so no Netflix capture directly. Let's just say teenager has to play a computer game to solve thermonuclear war and stop a time loop with aliens. Any one of those elements on their own is kind of pushing it, and altogether it's just so much presented in the sort of Mike Flanagan stilted way. It's weird, man, and it's probably one of my most despised short stories of all time. And there's like a weird meta element where I'm like, are they being clever? Are they not? And I'm like, it's Mike Flanagan. He's clever. And I don't even know how much he had to do with this season. I saw an article where he said he was sad it got canceled, but also like under the credits on IMDb, I'm not sure how much he actually had to do with the directing and the writing. It's weird. I assume, I don't know. It's bad. No one should ever watch this unless you really want to watch the episode and see the worst short story of all time. 3 for enjoyment, 3 for enjoyment, and 2 for just everything else. I mean, boy, we went from exciting to see a new Mike Flanagan Halloween show to like, I tried to finish it. I tried. I stopped like 2 episodes before the end. I couldn't make it. Onions are tasty. Oh. Little. It burns. I still like the taste. Oh, there we go. Oh. Midnight Club is the appropriate one to cry for. Oh. Next up, The Northman. I seem fated when I go to the movie theater every year to specifically only go to movies that bomb horribly. And this is one of them. Another director I really liked. But in a twist, this is a great movie. This is one of the best movies of the year. I really like The Northman. It's a very like Shakespearean Hamletian tale set with Vikings in Greenland and Norway and Denmark area. And it's delightful. It's a little inaccessible at the beginning. And I understand why it bombed. You see those first 10 minutes, you're like, ooh, this is, even for me, I was like, this is weird and I'm not getting into it. But once you get into the movie itself, it's delightful. It's surprisingly small scale and character focused. There's some good twists and turns. There's a nice like meta narrative. There's a great attention to historical detail. There's one amazing action scene towards the beginning. That's when it started picking up. And here, marketing team, another free advice. Remember that movie 1914? The World War I movie, right? That movie kind of sucked. It was not a good movie, but marketing everywhere was that final action scene. They didn't tell you it was the finale. They're just like, here's a scene from our movie. And you saw it and you're like, wow, this looks like a cool World War I movie. And then you go see it and you're like, oh, that was like the only scene in the entire movie that was interesting whatsoever. You could have just showed this one scene and marketing and just put it all over online and be like, this scene was done with one take. Here's how it's done. And people would have flocked to your movie because it's a cool scene of these barbarians raiding the village and they're like climbing up the walls. And then, yeah. And I guess I'm getting off track here just because it bombed. And you do see weird places here and there for the budget. You're like, could have cut back here. But for the most part, it's a really good story, really character focused. And it straight up redoes the Revenge of the Sith better than the original Revenge of the Sith. I mean, remember that Mustafar scene? Boom, that's the finale of this movie. And it's glorious and so much better. And I love this movie. I like it a lot. I guess I can't say love when I'm quantifying it this way. It was a very good movie. I'm very mostly I'm very sad that it didn't do better. So I'm giving it a 7-8. It's up there on the pantheon this year of 7-8 7 in enjoyment for sure, and then just it's hard not to appreciate all the like the Norse details and the runes and the accurate writing and the costumes and the sports. Whatever, I'm babbling. So yeah, go see it if you haven't. I would recommend it. Pinocchio 2022. I once spoke to Ben about doing a Guillermo del Toro retrospective and going through all his movies, and maybe I'll still do that if he'll do it with me, Ben. Wink, wink. But his most recent movie was Pinocchio 2022. The movie no one wanted. The movie, I'm not even sure if people watched it, really. And it was surprisingly good, but also kind of why you avoided it in the first place. The animation is gorgeous. It's one of the better looking movies I've seen animation-wise. It's really, really good. This like combination of stop motion and computer animation and effects. It's about fascism. It's about life and death. It's about letting go and accepting death. Yeah, like they replaced, and this is where it gets bad because it stuck too closely to the Pinocchio myth or the Pinocchio story while also trying to move away from it. Like instead of the Islands of Lost Boys, it's an Italian fascist camp because this movie takes place between World War I and World War II. Have you ever wanted to see Pinocchio do the Hitler salute? I've got a movie for you. But no, it's good. Even for children. If you just look at this as a children's movie, which this is probably like what you assume it is, it treats them with respect. It deals with heavy topics. It doesn't pull its punches. It has stuff for adults. The music sucks. The voice of Pinocchio sucks. And it's not surprising enough. Once you realize what it is, you're like, oh, this is the Pinocchio story. Yeah, I know this. And so maybe that sounds bad, but I just wanted Pinocchio to be a little less Pinocchio. You're already doing these deviations of ideas and like these flourishes. Take it further. Break the mold. So I'm giving Pinocchio a 5 in enjoyment and a 7 for potpourri because really good animation, surprising choices, and that was the thing I love. I particularly love adaptations because there's so many choices the people making it make because they're comparing it to the story and like other adaptations, and so it's really fun from like a writer's perspective or an analysis perspective to go through it and talk about it. Watch it if you want. Ben, watch it, and we can talk about all his movies. Yeah, even Geometria. We'll do them all. Rick and Morty. It's like a show I put on the background when it's on. And it's mostly forgettable, even like early seasons. I've never been like a huge Rick and Morty fan. Even saying it sounds like a curse word. It sounds dirty saying you watch it. Mostly the show is bookended, in this season included by really strong episodes at the beginning, really strong episodes at the end, and then the middle is just mostly forgettable with one or two standouts, and that's what this was. You just put it on in the background, like, I know what this is. It's moderately entertaining. 6 in enjoyment, 5 because, yeah, whatever. And the only interesting thing is that I think the potential is there for it to be better. If you compare the season finale episode compared to a lot of the writing for the rest of those episodes, or like just the standout episodes, there's such like an energy and creativity and just like way more put into like the big episodes than there are just the standard ones. And I know there's different writers, different teams. In a way, this is what I like about this. This is essentially like a proving ground to do anthology episodes for new writers and new people coming into the industry. That's cool. But yeah, could be better. Next up. Oh, I forgot how much crap we had this year. Many moons ago, there was a show on Netflix called Russian Doll, which was really good and very surprising. It had something for everyone, and I really enjoyed it. I watched it just because it was recommended, and I said, no news article. I didn't know people liked this thing. I just said, oh, I'm bored today. I will watch Russian Doll, and I loved it. They made a sequel. My first thought in the sequel was an interesting one, because normally when you have a sequel that's not called for, you say, oh no. But my reaction was, I don't know what they're going to do. But the first one was so off the wall and enjoyable that I trust them. I gave them my trust, and I shouldn't have. I made it through Russian Doll on sheer willpower, hoping that there would be some twist or there'd be some sort of coming together where everything would make sense and like justify itself. And it's bad. Like literally the first episode retcons the first season. They realized that the ending of the first season, which was kind of like this bittersweet thing of you can't have your cake and eat it too. And it's like, no, actually, just forget about that. We can't do a second season if that's the ending. So like they just threw out the ending. They retcon. Oh, the first season, by the way. The first season is about like a Groundhog's Day scenario where she's being forced to become a better person, and there's another guy. It's a whole thing. It's like a really, really good Groundhog Day TV series. This one is about time travel, where she has to go back in time and find Jew gold so she can be rich. But not that rich, just a little rich. It is straight up the plot of a South Park episode.
All Jews carry gold in a little bag around their necks. Hand it over. Guys, come on! Jews do not carry gold in a little bag around their necks, Cartman. Stop playing around!
Conflict is not compelling. Whenever the conflict, much like when I talked about the house, is I just want money, like that's not a... I don't care if you get money or not. I have no real stakes in this. I'm sure there's ways to do that and make it more compelling, but it wasn't. And the end, the last couple episodes are just nonsense. It does the whole thing again the first season did, where the dream's collapsing, and it's just nonsense. And I don't even know, man. This was bad. This was horrendous. I hated this. 3-2. 2-3. 2-3. 3 in enjoyment. 3 in concept. 3 in potpourri. Yeah, we'll put it there for now. That's subject to change. The more you think, it's one of those where the more you think about it, the more you don't like it. The Sea Beast. It's not good. It's like a children's movie. That is a children's movie. There's like children's movie. I Love Wall-E. It's a children's movie, but there's no but here. It's just weird. It's weird. And it jumps the shark right away where it's like, oh, this character's dead. Like, oh, that's exciting. And I didn't think you were going to do that. And it's like, no, we lied. And then the main character, this little girl, is not only precocious, because she is precocious, but she also seems to be a little psychic. She seems to know things and understand social theory and the way history works in a precognitive manner. You kind of get to the end, you're like, what really happened in this movie? It's like one of those, you're like, I guess really nothing much happened. They kind of just went out, they came back, and then it was over. And that sounds bad, because you're like, oh, well, Mad Max, they go out and they come back. I'm like, no, that's memorable. And like, stuff happened that was exciting. This is just like, what happened? I don't even remember. So, I don't know. 5-4? 5-4. 4-5. 4-5. 4-5. 4 in enjoyment, 5 in other. It's mostly fine. It's just kind of like a crappy kids movie you put on for your kids and you don't watch for yourself. So, sure. Smiling Friends. I feel dirty putting this under Rick and Morty, but it's like a 5-5 for me. It's like very light comedy, very enjoyable. I watched the pilot many, many moons ago on YouTube, just because it had like Mike Stoklasa in it. And I saw like this one came out and I said, ooh, I'll watch it. And it's fun. The biggest thing I can say that while not like excellent or groundbreaking, it's very fresh. The tone, the humor, everything is very different compared to other comedies I've seen before. So even though I am putting it in the 5-5 category, I would recommend it because it might be your thing or it might be completely not your thing. I enjoyed it. Stranger Things. Season 4. Lost the audio on this one for a bit. Let's keep it short. The first 70-80% of the show is the best the show has ever been. Yes, it's still lacking on creativity, but in terms of writing and the script, and moreover the editing, phenomenal. They kept it very tight. They kept it really interesting. There's still transitions I can think of in my head, but then when you get to the last 20%, it's genuinely confusing and it falls on its places. It falls on its faces. To the point where there's entire character beats and finishings of arcs that I fundamentally don't understand. The end of the Dr. Brenner story. What? Was that supposed to be a sad, emotional beat? That doesn't make sense. And the big thing is, and I think this is why I'm done with the show in general, is that I think the big conclusion here really shows the writer's inability to add anything to the creative space that they're working in. Yes, they've been borrowing a lot of stuff, but when it comes to the end of the season here, and when they're completely out on their own, flying on their own, it's just nothing. There's literally nothing. Things go in circle. There's a man who rides on a bike in this epic scene because, ooh, emotion. And then he just rides back to where he started and gets eaten by bats. It's faux storytelling. They faux kill off a character at the end, which they've done legitimately at the end of every season. 11 and Hopper, and now the character in this season, I'm not going to waste putting this in the spoilers, where they seem to need to have that big gotcha moment at the end where it's like, did this character die? No, they didn't. That's clear. It's clear at this point when you do it 4 times in a row that the character is not dead. Thank you very much. I'm done. Just done. Every time. 4 to 5. It's gotten to the point now where I'm kind of annoyed that it's so popular. Like, it doesn't deserve it. Me being the arbiter of what is popular and what is not. You can only like what I like. But there are shows like that. You just go, people's time and energy could be put into something better. Speaking of vampires, how did I miss that transition before? The second video game on my list, and the last one, Vampire Survivors. I like roguelikes, clearly. You can play for 10 minutes and then come back and next week and play 10 minutes and there's no loss of whatever. But this one in particular is like shooting dopamine right into your brain. Just, it nails it. Like I said before about the aesthetics and how it looks versus the rating. If you see a game that looks amazing and it says very positive, it's probably not very good. But if you see a game that looks like absolute crap and it's overwhelmingly positive, you got yourself a winner. And that's what this one is. It's just pure roguelike goodness. It's all hoardy, swarmy. You build stuff up. It's fun. There's no point in explaining it beyond that other than to say, from a game design standpoint, I thought it was very clever, like surprisingly clever, because you go in thinking, okay, this is what it is, but then it continually builds on itself, and like all the elements of the gameplay, like maps and builds and time, and like they all sort of like start interrelating, and so there's like, it builds up as you go, and things become more complicated, and there's this level of depth that was horribly surprising. I do think it kind of falls on its face at the end. I know they're still working on it, so maybe that'll get fixed, but it's not really enjoyable to play post-game, but I really, really like it. And as sacrilege as it is to put this above things everyone else worked very hard on and did lovely stories and had characters and whatnot, like, this was just a good time when I was playing it. It's an 8 out of 8. This is just a really fun game. It's like $5. Go play it if you like roguelikes whatsoever. It's not the best roguelike. Slay the Spire is still the king, baby. But it's a good one. It's a good one. What We Do in the Shadows. It's the same as it's always been. Some people, I think most people I've talked to really, really dig this show. I'm not sure if I'm in that boat. I just think it's fun. It's fun. It's a 6 out of 6, and it's consistent and it's fun. And yeah, you know, if you watch the first season, you know what you're getting into. It's maintained the quality. Jeremy Clemane in particular, I just love the man. He's a funny man. I love Jeremy Clemane. So yeah, 6 out of 6. X. I think it was the first movie I saw this year. This is another thing. Clearly, you're about to find out what catches my interest when someone tells me it's crazy. I was like, oh, it's crazy. You ain't ever seen a slasher movie like this. You have. It's not crazy. The interesting part is that the first half is about these guys in the 70s in Texas, this team who go to film a porno on a farm. And the character drama stuff, everything on the drama side works really well. The character building, the relationships, what they're doing there. I think it's really overbloated. This movie is 30 minutes too long, but the core of what you have is actually very interesting, and which made me sad when people started getting killed. It's not a spoiler. The entire point of this movie is that there's an old lady who kills people. The murderer is a 90-year-old woman, and that's kind of the shtick. And you know what? It didn't work. Like, you might say, like, oh, how does a 90-year-old kill people? And that's kind of my point. The people who got murdered really had to bend over backwards to sort of get murdered. They're like, I'm going to just stoop down and look in this little hole. Oh, I'm dead. There's one genuinely disturbing scene in the movie, but it has nothing to do with the murders. It has nothing to do with them filming a porno. But it's sexual in nature. I'll let you use your imagination. I know there's sequels. I know there's a prequel. One of those hasn't come out yet, but I just don't care. I don't know. They might be interesting. It's not a horrible movie, but it's also, if you cut it down, if you really condensed what you had and like literally cut off 30 minutes, I'd be more into it. But right now it's 4 out of 4. 4 an enjoyment, 4 another. Doesn't do much for me. For those of you who like to look at tier lists, I'm just going to put it up on screen for 30 seconds because that's what I would do if I was watching this video. Look at my glorious epileptic art and despair. Join me next time while we talk about the elephant in the room. I'll also do some spoiler talk for Cyberpunk and Glass Onion.